and asked to meet with me before I left town. So Wednesday night, they said they want to meet before I leave town. Thursday night, I've got an event, and then Friday morning, I'm leaving town. So I had to record an episode for the radio program. I got breakfast. I recorded an episode. I got on the phone with the first guy, and I texted him and said, okay, here's where I am. Here's the time I have. He goes, well, we can meet. And he says there's 3 restaurants, one of which is literally a 10-minute walk from where I'm staying. Wonderful. Let's go there and meet. I text the next guy going, listen, I'm going to be here from like 11 to 12. If you want to meet, why don't you show up at 12 o'clock and we'll just tag team, right? No problem. So I had breakfast. I recorded my episode. I had like 10 minutes. I walked up to the restaurant, met with the first guy, had a great conversation, stack of papers, met with the second guy, and the first guy was actually interested in what the second guy was talking about. So, he ended up, you're being difficult. He ended up staying. I got done with both of them. I go back to where I was staying. I had a lady who was nice enough to let me stay, use a guest room that she had. And I'm okay, where's the live stream and details? Oh, there we are. Sorry, one of my live streams didn't come up. I get back, I'm starting to settle in, and the next thing I know, there's a guy. I have a room with a sliding glass door. It's on the first floor, and there's a guy peeking in the window. And I go to see who it is. It's actually the lady's husband. I had actually not met him yet. I'd only met the wife. So I was talking with him for a little bit, and he said, "Oh, so where are you speaking tonight?" I told him where it was. He says, "Well, traffic is going to be worse than what you expect. So if the if the GPS says it's half an hour, it's actually going to be an hour, whatever it was." So I said, okay, well then I have to change and leave because I have to leave now to get there on time. It was a crazy day that had a crazy ending to it, but life was good. I can't complain. I've met a lot of great people. I sold a bunch of books, and all in all, it was a great trip. It just that one day happened to be the crazy day. And there, live streamers, yes, we're getting set up ahead of time. We'll be starting at the top of the hour. I am still trying to get my software all coordinated because one of my live streams says it hasn't come up yet. One side says it's up, one side says it's not. There we go. Gotcha. That side says it's up. So why are you not?
I have a couple things tonight, but I'm going to let everyone else ask questions or whatnot. If there's any kind of dead space, I'll just fill in that time. I mean, I have both questions and discussion things, just general.
Well, remember the whole thing is for questions. I mean, I don't want one person to dominate, but I want everybody to have their chance to get questions. And the last couple times has been a little light in the questions. So hopefully, we'll have questions. I've got some pre-canned questions that I was asked on the website. So hopefully everything will be hunky and dory. And it's 7 o'clock. Do you know where your Constitution is? And how many people are old enough to understand that reference? Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here. You've joined the Constitution Study Live Q&A. I'm still looking to see how many people I've got online. Doesn't say much. Anyhow, this is a live question and answer. Now, I have a couple people here on the Zoom call. I expected some more. A couple people reach out to make sure they had links. So hopefully we'll get a couple people popping into the Zoom call. If you are on one of the live streams, Rumble, YouTube, where else am I? Rumble, YouTube, and on the website, constitutionsociety.com. Ask a question, just type your question into the comments. I will take some time to answer it, but I'm also taking questions live from my compatriots here on the Zoom call, since they were here first and no one seems to have asked a question anywhere else yet. Who's up for a first question?
I got several. Let's see.
I would expect nothing less, Tunnel Lord.
Let's see. Okay. I wrote them down. I'm just gonna figure out which one to ask.
Pick one, anyone. Pick a question, any question. Don't show me your card.
Oh, this is a good one. Well, this isn't about the Constitution, though. It's more of a discussion thing. So, well, I'll just go with it, get it over with. How come the founders never really put any disciplinary words in the U.S. Constitution for when people violate the U.S. Constitution? I mean, I was on this. I was assuming, oh, it's just because it's our job to discipline our employees. We're just to go and recall them or fire them when they do violate the U.S. Constitution. So.
Well, that's actually a very interesting question. And I believe you are correct that part of it is yes, it's our responsibility to discipline our employees. Now, in the Congress, each house can also discipline its members, but it's ultimately our responsibility to discipline them. But this also ends up with an interesting question. The late Ruth Bader Ginsburg was once asked about, I forget, she was speaking somewhere overseas, and she said, if a country wanted to create a new constitution, she would not, let me move this over, she would not frame it the same way as the United States Constitution. And her reasoning was, put it in my own words, the Constitution was vague. In other words, it wasn't specific as you have the right to this and that and the other thing. I had a very similar discussion. I was at an event here a couple months ago, and I bumped into a guy from Germany. There was an author there that we were both interested in talking to, and we ended up talking. And one statement he made was, well, see, in the German Constitution, we have a rule that, what was it? That our Congress can't do whatever it wants. And I said, well, we have the same rule here. He goes, no, you don't. I says, our Fifth Amendment and our 14th Amendment both say you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. Congress is not allowed to violate that. That wasn't exactly the question, now I think about it, but it was the same thing. The German Constitution was very specific. Their government cannot do this. The U.S. Constitution is principles-based. In other words, it establishes principles as a framework within which the government is supposed to work. And that becomes important because you end up with, and I'll use the Second Amendment because it's one of the most common examples used. People say, well, when they wrote the Second Amendment, they were thinking about muskets, not AR-15s. Except that's exactly wrong. They recognized, listen, there are going to be advancements. Things are going to change over time. If we say you cannot be, that the right of the people to keep and bear muskets shall not be infringed, what would happen when new firearms came out? Which is why the Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms. It's the principle that the government doesn't have the legal authority to prevent you from owning or carrying arms. And arms, as defined by Noah Webster from his dictionary in 1828, is weapons for offense and armor for defense. So an arm is basically any weapon you have that you can use for offense, or armor you have for defense to protect yourself and your body, yourself, your property. And I think too often we want someone to figure out all the details for us rather than taking a little bit of time and pondering, recognizing the beauty that while the German Constitution is relatively young, I think it was, I don't know if it was the 60s was the last time they came up with a new constitution. I mean, so it's 50, 60 years old. Ours is approaching 250. And ours is approaching 250 years. It is the oldest national constitution in the world. And it's lasted that long because rather than picking all the details, they established principles that you're supposed to work with it. It's the same reason why the Constitution for the European Union is God knows how many pages long, because it got into all the details, whereas the United States Constitution, except for how it set up the three branches of government, the rest of it dealt with principles. What's the principle behind this? That's the framework to deal with. So it's actually an interesting question for if you're going to be studying the Constitution. Again, for those of you just joining online, if you want to ask a question, simply type it into your comments. I should see it pop up on my screen somewhere, and I will respond to it accordingly. I haven't seen any yet, but that's how you guys ask questions. Tunnel Lord, you've asked one. How about Andy? Have you got one tonight?
Sure. I have just simple, just to start off, the concept of DC becoming a state. I can't quote off the top of my head, but I know it's, I believe DC is allotted, 10 square miles of land?
An area 10 miles square. So it's actually 100
Yes.
square miles.
Okay. So there's no way they could become a state, right? It would be conflict.
It would be illegal because, and let me find the exact, it's Article 1, Section 8, Clause, I think it's 17 or 18. Congress has the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States. So the seat of government has to be a territory that's run by Congress and that is separate from the states. And they did that for very good reason. They didn't want any one state to have undue influence over the seat of the federal government. Right? Just imagine, right? Originally, the capital was in New York City. So just imagine first Cuomo, now Hochul, setting the rules for people entering the state of New York to attend Congress. We don't want that. Now, there are a lot of people that want it now because DC tends to be very Democratic. So it's always the Democrats pushing for DC statehood. Same thing for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has been offered the opportunity to become a state many times in the last several years, and every time they vote no. Puerto Rico can become a state. Washington, D.C., it is a federal conflict because now we have to move the seat of the federal government, which means some state has to secede space for that to happen. Of course, they pay so little attention to the Constitution. What does that matter? What's interesting, though, and I knew I was going to start a firestorm when I published the article USA Inc. or USA Incorporated, because there are a lot of people that claim that the United States is now a private corporation. And I love it. I've read a lot of stuff. They claim, oh yeah, it's the Incorporation Act 1871. We did all this. So I did something weird. I actually found, I searched the internet. I found the Incorporation Act of 1871, and it says nothing about incorporating the United States. It says, listen, we have a city called Washington. It is within the district. It is now basically taken over the district, although technically you still have the city of Georgetown. And it's now going to, it was an unincorporated city. So the Incorporation Act of 1871 incorporated the city of Washington in the District of Columbia into a municipal corporation. That's it. That's all it did. I had someone else was saying, well, no. It was the Incorporation Act. Was it 1874? I got to go check my notes. It's been a while. But they quoted another one that said, oh, no, this made it a corporation. So I went and I found it. And I read it. And actually, it was 1870, 1871, and 1874. I think it was 1870 was supposedly the incorporation that incorporated DC. 1871 was the rules for corporations that wish to domicile in Washington, D.C. In 1874, I haven't looked yet, but I've yet to find anyone that even claims that incorporated the United States. Only the city of Washington within the District of Columbia. I got another comment on that the other day. I haven't answered yet because, well, I like to take my time and make sure I'm answering thoughtfully, not reactively. So it's always interesting, even the history of DC, because DC, the District of Columbia, both Maryland and Virginia ceded territory to create a 10-mile square District of Columbia. And then the Congress created two counties, one on the east side of the Potomac called Washington County, and one on the west side of the Potomac called Alexandria County. And then Virginia asked for their land back. They said, we want it back. We don't want this anymore. And they reseeded Alexandria County, there's territory west of the Potomac, back to DC, which is why, if you look at it, DC has this really straight lines and then this jagged thing across the river, because it was originally perfectly square, but Virginia wanted their land back. It's that fun and games. Okay, let me pick one of my questions that I was asked on the website. I mentioned this to the Zoomers, but I've been promoting people to ask questions to the website. I have a form people fill out, and I added the option for people to have it answered here on the Constitution Study or on the radio program, or both. So I've had some that popped in, and I figured I'd answer them here. This one's titled Traffic Citations. He says, I'm listening to your interview with Sheriff Mack. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like he supports his deputies enforcing traffic citations. It is my understanding under the Constitution, these frivolous color of law infractions, codes, and statutes are unconstitutional and not enforceable. Please expound. Thank you for what you do. I'm in Bradenton, Florida, and hope to meet you in Tampa. Well, I hope I met them in Tampa. Bradenton is one of the places I visited. So traffic citations. The first thing we have to understand is there is a hard, distinct line between the powers of the federal government and the powers of the state. The 10th Amendment says either a power is delegated to the United States, or it remains with the states, or it remains with the people. Only options. Traffic citations. There is nothing in the Constitution that I can think of that automatically invalidates all traffic citations. Now, that said, there are traffic citations, traffic laws. That's what the laws. I mean, citation is a violation of the law. It is a claim, it is a document saying that you violated a law. So let's talk about traffic laws. To understand this, we have to understand that when you read the Constitution, liberty, right? You talk about not being deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Liberty is actually, it's not a bumper sticker definition. there's actually it's a multi-paragraph definition. I do a 1 hour class understanding what is a right, and I spend probably 20-30 minutes just on the definition of liberty. But let me sum it up. When you're talking about liberty in the Constitution, you're generally talking about what's called civil liberty, meaning your right to live your life without external influence, either physical or psychological, that is restrained only by natural law or as is necessary for the safety and efficacy of society, right? So natural law, those are the laws that are so obvious, we shouldn't need to write them down. I summarize them as we don't hurt people and we don't take their stuff. And then civil laws are those positive laws that are necessary for the safety of society. So use this example. Here in the United States, we drive on the right-hand side of the road. In England, they drive on the left-hand side of the road. Now, this is important for safety of society, right? Because, if I drive on the right-hand side of the road and Tunnel Lord drives on the left-hand side of the road and Andy drives in the shade, it is very dangerous, not just for ourselves, but for society. I am putting not only myself at risk, but other people at risk because, well, which way is the traffic coming from? Who goes, if I live in a rural area, very often there are roads that are very narrow. And you have to understand that if you have opposing traffic, you pull to the right. That's important. Without that, it's chaos. So that is a civil law that is justified. It is necessary for the safety of society. However, seatbelt laws and helmet laws are not necessary for safety of society. They are there for the safety of the individual. Therefore, they are depriving you of your right to be, in my opinion, stupid. I don't ride a motorcycle without a helmet. My life was saved by a motorcycle helmet when I was a young boy. I cannot drive in a car without a seatbelt on. It actually makes me nervous to the point of almost being ill. But I don't have the right to tell someone else they must. And those citations, those laws that are not justified, in other words, the way Noah Webster put it, if a positive law is not necessary for society, that is tyranny. So it's not all traffic citations are unconstitutional. However, as often happens, when we expect government to protect us rather than protect our rights, they pass a lot of laws that are not necessary for the safety of society. Those are unconstitutional. They do deprive you of your liberty without due process of law. So there's one question down from them. Let me where did I put it? Oh yeah, okay. Check it off my list so I know that I've answered that. Okay, I got one from Ronan. Ronan, how does an American citizen remonstrate to the federal government? How do they remonstrate to their state government? Ronan, can you give me a little more details? I'm not quite sure exactly. Remonstrate means to pay, unless there's a definition I'm unfamiliar with. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is you're asking. So I'll put that on hold. If you can, just give me a little more details of what you're talking about, and I'll be glad to try and answer that. Let's head back to the Zoom room. We got another question out of the Zoom room.
Sure. Since I think Tunnel Lord is taking a quick break, I can shoot something in. How about, do you mind explaining qualified immunity?
Oh, my Betnar, qualified immunity. Okay. Qualified immunity is one of those things that started out as a good idea and really went south. The idea started as something like this. Imagine you're a police officer and you are handed a warrant, and your warrant is to go search someplace or to go to arrest somebody. And so you execute the warrant. You arrest it. Let's say you arrest somebody. You arrest the guy, and come to find out the warrant wasn't valid. It's not based on probable cause, oath or affirmation. There's something wrong with the warrant. So this guy, this person who's been unlawfully arrested, sues you as the arresting officer for unlawful arrest. Qualified immunity was designed to say, listen, if the officer acted in good faith, in other words, if the officer was not abusing their position, but was actually acting in good faith, then they would be immune from being served, being sued. Right? That was a general idea. Now, the Supreme Court came up with this brilliant idea. They said, you know what? This good faith, how do we know what the officer was thinking? We need to come up with a better test. So what did they do? And I forget exactly how they worded it, but they basically said that, well, if the officer hadn't been told by a court, if the car officer couldn't have reasonably known that what they were doing was unconstitutional, then they have qualified immunity. And the idea was, see, originally the immunity was qualified on your good faith actions. Now it's on a court's interpretation of, well, how reasonable was it for you to understand this? Now, the problem becomes the details. See, it's no longer the actions of the officer that are in question, or the thought behind the action of the officer. It's the thought of the court about what the officer should have reasonably known. And here's my perfect example. I forget where it happened. There was two officers were in hot pursuit of a felon. Felon jumps a fence into a backyard. The officers follow. Right? It's considered an exigent circumstance. They are allowed to enter property if they are in hot pursuit of a felon. They draw their weapons. They order everybody on the ground, including the felon, including the family. The family complies. Everybody stop. Everybody's on the ground. And while the officers are taking the accused felon into custody, the family dog comes out of the house, wondering what's going on. I don't know if you're dog lovers, you may, but I'm a dog lover. Don't have my dog in here with me, but I love dogs. The dog is curious. The dog is not aggressive. It's not growling. It's not biting. It's not attacking. It's curious. It's sniffing around the son because why is all my family on the ground? They tell the dog to go back in the house. Dog goes back in the house. A couple minutes later, dog comes back out. One of the officers turns, shoots the dog, kills the dog, and in the process wounds the son. And a court said, well, we hadn't said that it is unconstitutional to shoot a dog that is not an imminent threat, and in so doing, not only kill the dog, but harm an innocent bystander. So we're going to grant them qualified immunity. That's the abuse. The abuse suddenly becomes, unless a court says, listen, and you asked the question, Andy, you know what? When you're arresting a person, you can't beat them with your nightstick. You can't put them in a chokehold. You can't shoot them in the leg just because they're running away. So those are the rules. So you go out and instead of shooting them in the leg, you shoot them in the arm. See, we didn't say anything about the arm. So you have qualified immunity. The problem is not so much I don't like the way the court has done it, but it's the way the courts abuse qualified immunity to protect officers and to protect bad actions from officers. And it reminds me very much of one of the grievances. Where is it? That's one of the favorites. The king had protected soldiers from protected soldiers by a mock trial from punishments for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. That's what qualified immunity has become. Not so much because of the actual letter of the opinion of the standard that courts use. It's the way they abuse it. And let's face it, courts are part of government. they naturally tend towards protecting members of government. So, and I haven't gotten an answer back from Ronan. Let me grab another question over here then, because I had a couple of interesting ones. I have one that deals with well, let me just do this. Can you explain the validity of people establishing jural assemblies? It goes fourth and fifth branch, along with their grand juries, all based on common law, and how they need to replace the current maritime admiralty corporate law system, where the courts are nothing more than foreign vessels in dry dock operating by the rules of civil procedures. Now, men and women, not persons or citizens, have no rights in these venues. All right, let's deal with the jural assemblies. The idea of citizens assembling for procedures. Now, here, I have yet. First of all, there's no mention of jural assemblies in the U.S. Constitution. They are mentioned in several state constitutions. So your state may or may not have a concept of, for example, let's say your I don't want to pick the governor. Let's say some county commissioner is breaking the law. You have a sheriff that's shaking people down, and you're trying to get your district attorney to file charges. The district attorney refuses. What are the people to do? And jural assemblies are, as I understand them, one of those things at a state level that may be an option. But he brought up something that's been interesting, and I've talked about it before, and that is the idea of the common law grand jury. The idea of we the people forming a grand jury. And I have yet to see anybody give me a rational legal justification for that type of common law grand jury. However, hang on to your seats, because I'm open to another idea. Why do I have an issue with quote unquote common law grand juries as I've normally heard them described? The purpose of the grand jury is to act as a check on government, right? So the primary purpose of a grand jury is before the government can charge you with a serious crime, right? That's the Fifth Amendment. You cannot be charged for an infamous crime except on indictment by grand jury. You have a right to prevent government from charging you with a serious crime without the people saying it's okay. So if you go, I see Andy, he's already headed, good man, he's headed for a constitution. That's the way it is, right? You got to go back to the source. That's what I always say, go back to the source. So the Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held for answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So let's say I don't care. There's somebody that let's say I get charged with a crime, right? Before the feds can actually charge me with a serious crime. Let's say they claim that I incited insurrection for January 6th, and they can't simply send me to trial. They need a grand jury. They need a grand jury of my peers to say, yes, you actually have a case worth pursuing in court. So again, one of the roles of the grand jury is to prevent out of control government prosecutions, right? And the grand juries they're set up, they're highly weighted towards the prosecution. The defense is not aware of the grand jury. The defense does not participate in the grand jury. They're not allowed to present evidence, nothing. It's all what the prosecution has, which is why we often hear, or at least I hear, the statement that a good prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. That's always been my understanding of grand juries, is they are a check on the government. However, there is a thought process that grand juries can be used to act as a check on government, another check on government. And this is where I'm in discussion with somebody that I'm learning more about this. This, by the way, is not a common law grand jury. This is not we the people getting together, finding so-and-so has committed sufficient evidence that so-and-so has committed a crime and charge them. All right. That's not what I'm talking about. Having been from New York, I know a lot of people would be more than happy They could easily find a couple dozen people to get together, say there's more than sufficient evidence that Cuomo had committed serious offenses and offer an indictment. Right, and that's not what I'm talking about. However, the idea of the grand jury is who can place a charge before the grand jury. It is almost always the prosecutor, the district attorney, the U.S. attorney. I'm working with somebody, and I haven't had much time to follow up with the idea of, can citizens put together sufficient evidence to call a grand jury to investigate a crime? That's a different understanding of grand jury that I'm familiar with, and I'm still working through that. This idea, which makes sense, right? Because if take all these cities where the district attorney refuses to prosecute certain crimes. I mean, just look what happened in Wisconsin, right? The guy that ran into that Christmas parade was on $1,000 bail for running over, what was it, his wife? Was the district attorney criminally negligent in their duties? That I'd love to see a grand jury formed to investigate that. Grand juries, as I understand it, do have investigative powers, and so I'm still working my way through that one. That one's a little different. So, but as far as like I said, the original question, jural assemblies is mostly a state issue. The concept of people calling for the formation of a grand jury, I'm still working through some details on that. The statements about the admiralty law, corporate law, foreign vessels, I'm sorry, that's mostly conspiracy theory and misinformation, because I've yet to see. Somebody was telling me that lawyers are members of the Bar Association, and supposedly BAR stands for British Admiralty Rule or something like that. No, BAR stands for the bar that stands between the gallery and the lawyers and the judges. And in order to pass the bar, in other words, in order to approach the front of the court, you have to be involved. Now, I'm not a fan of the Bar Association, but no, you don't become a British subject because you become a member of the bar. Sorry, doesn't work that way. Let's see. Rhiannon has not followed up with her question. So I'm still not quite sure the details of what does she mean by remonstrate to the federal government. I mean, the federal government withholds taxes from you, and your employer sends them to the federal government. If you owe money on your taxes, you send them a check. That's how you remonstrate to the federal government or to the state government. I know a lot of people who work W-2 jobs, they actually get rebates. They don't realize that if you underpay, you have to write them a check. That's all you do. You write a check to the Department of Treasury. Okay. Still looking for questions online. I don't know if Tunnel Lords come back yet. If not, Andy, have you got another one for me?
Sure. If you don't mind, I was going to explain why I was flipping through the Constitution there for a second. Just when you were talking about a grand jury, I was thinking of double jeopardy.
Okay.
And I'm thinking Amendment 7 ensues the common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the rate of trial by jury. And that's where I was thinking, like, wait, does it say jury or just say grand jury? And I was trying to differentiate that. That's all it was.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, that's good, right? Because I keep saying, my favorite verse in Scripture, the one I've tried to live my life by, is Acts chapter 17, verses 10 and 11. Verse 11 is, and they, being the Bereans, were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they listened to what was said and went back to Scripture daily to see if it was so. Right? We go back to their language. to see if it's so. That's exactly what you're doing. That's great. By the way, I find it interesting because think about it. $20 in 1776 is a lot more than $20 in 2021. But the way the language is written, right? That's a perfect example of they were specific. $20. So now if you sue your neighbor for $20, you have a right to have that suit heard by a jury.
Never even thought about it that way. That's, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, I can throw a question in there if no one else
Yeah,
has
if you got,
anything.
come
for
on.
the-
I'm not.
Yeah,
seeing
sure.
a lot of
Yeah, I got
questions
stuff.
going
Unless, is Tom Lord back?
on. He hasn't said so, and I don't have any questions. I don't have any comments here, except I'm still hoping Rhiannon will.
I'm here.
Hey,
Oh,
Tom
go
Lord.
ahead. Go ahead. Your turn.
Okay, let's see. Uh,
I feel like this is bingo night. He's just rolling the thing, waiting to see which question comes out.
well, no, I got a bunch. I'm trying to pick one that's
I'm the same way, man. I got a whole list I can go through.
yeah. Yeah, same
Well,
way.
that's good. Then we won't be sitting around here going, anybody got a question?
Okay, so here's an interesting one. All right.
Okay.
So there was a situation in my state where a woman, the county or I think the city shut down a playground. They closed it off, and then she went and took her kids to it anyways, even though they closed it down because of the whole COVID nonsense or whatever. And she says she's like the innocent one, but I'm thinking like, no, they closed off the property. You can't just go onto it now. This has nothing to do with your rights. This is just a simple law thing. They close off the property that's owned by the state, so you can't really walk onto it yet, or until they say you can. It's not a government building or anything. It's just a playground. So I don't know.
So, yeah, I heard about that. And a lot depends on the Idaho Constitution because that property is public property, which means it's basically owned by everybody, held in trust by, in this case, probably a city government, not a state government.
Yeah.
The question is, does the city government have the right to deny people access to publicly held property? In other words, what's the difference between a playground and a sidewalk? Does the city have the legal authority, or under what conditions can the city prohibit access to public property? Now, a government building, okay, you've got certain security issues there, right? You've got public owned property. You don't want people rummaging around at night, right? That makes sense. If you're dealing with, like, say, a swimming pool where the ordinance says that there must be a lifeguard on duty because of the dangers, maybe a playground gets a little interesting, because what is a playground? It is a piece of land with some play equipment on it. It is not guarded. It is not normally guarded, at least not since I've dealt with kids, right? It's not normally, does it require the presence of any government official for it to be functional? In other words, there is no governmental reason I can think of to require its shutdown. Now, they shut it down, they said, for public health. Is that a power delegated to the city under Idaho's Constitution? I do not know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So I on the issue at hand for me is less, was she there when the government said no, but does the government have the legal authority does any government have the legal authority to deny access to something that doesn't require their participation? A perfect example being when Obama was president and they had the quote unquote government shutdown. They never really shut down the government, but they had the government shutdown. And you had government officials, you had forestry service officials going out of their way to block access to public lands. We're not talking about, you had the ranger station open and no. You're saying you got this public park and they went out of their way to keep people out of what is basically just a plot of public land. Not really any different from a public sidewalk. Imagine the government saying, hey, we're going to shut down all the public sidewalks because we don't want people walking. All right. What is the limit of access? And if it doesn't involve, my first thought being, if a government employee presence is not required, then under what justification can you shut it down? And I'll actually give you an example I bumped into many years ago. For my wife's grandmother's 80th birthday, they did a bus trip to go to the Statue of Liberty. We lived in upstate New York. She had never been to the Statue of Liberty. She was 80 years old. She was going. My wife was going. My mother-in-law was going. They wanted me to go, partially because my father-in-law wouldn't go if he was the only guy. So my wife said, Paul, will you go? Of course, I had lived in New York City for many years. I was very familiar with the city, no problem. We go. It happened to be when the government shut down under H.W. Bush. We get in the bus, we get all the way down there. We are at Battery Park, and we find out it's closed. The statue is closed. Now, the park was still open, but the ferry service to get you to Liberty Island was shut down because all the employees were furloughed. Right? The security, the rangers on Liberty Island were all furloughed. So we could go to Battery Park. We could go to all the areas around it, but there was no service to get us to Liberty Island. And to me, that was technically Battery Park is state land, not federal land, or it's city land, actually. But to me, that was a distinction. If all it is property and there's no government employee presence required, what justification do you have for shutting it down? That'd be the question I had. Rionian jumped back on. Yay. Okay. Sorry. She's expressing to an expression of protest, complaint, or reproof, especially a formal statement of grievance. Okay. I first learned of citizens' right to remonstrate. Okay. Hang on just a second here. I think I understand your question better now, Rihanna. Just give me a quick second here. Okay. It's funny because, yes, remonstrate means to present. And I've always seen it used with money, but that's okay. Let's see. A citizen's right to remonstrate to the legislature. John Gentry is trying to restore that right in Tennessee. Independent campaign for governor. Okay. First thing to understand, Rhiannon, is every position, every elected office that you directly vote for is your employee. All right. That includes House, Senate, governor, state house, state senate, county commission, county board, school board, sheriff. They are all your employees. As a citizen, you have a right to petition the government for redress of grievance. It's protected for federal issues in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. It's for state issues and local issues. It's the Constitution of your state. It's not that you necessarily have a formal constitutional process. You have the right to pick up the phone and call your House rep, your senator, to send them a letter, send them an email, show up with a petition. These are all ways to communicate with your employees at the different levels of government. Now, as you get higher up or what should be lower down the food chain, right? The government, the Constitution and the Constitution of our states set the the local governments, the state governments, the federal government going down, not down in power, not up. So as you go from your local to your state, so you go city, county to state, it's harder to get time with your representative because they're representing more people. As you go from state to federal, it gets even harder because they're representing more people. For example, when I moved to Tennessee, one of the first things I did was contacted my new state rep and my new state senator. And I confuse a lot of people. You'll find that's quite common. I confuse people because I said, I want to meet with you. Well, what do you want to talk about? I says, I just want to meet with them. I don't know them. Was able to actually schedule a meeting with both of them at the same time. And I brought my daughter. My daughter was 17 at the time. And I went and I said, listen, here, I am new. What are the big political issues you're dealing with? I want to get to know you. I want you to have a face with a name. I want to be able to, I want, when I email you, when I call you, I don't want to be just some other, faceless name on a call sheet. I want you to recognize that, oh, that's that guy, for good or for ill. And it worked really great at first. It got it's been a little tough lately, but we discussed a lot of different topics and had again, a good discussion. We didn't agree on everything, but it was the opportunity to have a conversation with my state rep, my state senator. My state rep, I can still pretty much get an answer from. My state senator is a new guy, and I don't get an answer from him, which kind of pisses me off. But I'm basically, the next time I'm at the state capitol, I'm going to camp at his office. But the other thing I did is I met with my sheriff. Now, that was another one where I confused the poor man. I was at a county board meeting. I basically went just to see how things worked. I hadn't been involved in the county government. I found that the county board meeting is basically a rubber stamp for what the committees were doing. I learned something, but I bumped into the sheriff and I said, great to meet you. Listen, can I call your office? I want to have a meeting with you. He goes, what do you want to talk about? I says, I just want to meet you. I want to meet you and talk over a couple things outside of the campaign, right? I don't want this to be a campaign stop. I want to meet. Okay, yeah, sure. Called his office, set a time, showed up to meet him, had a very nice conversation. At one point I said, excuse me, but here's what I want. I said, when I pick up the phone and dial 911 and you say one of your deputies shows up, I want to know that they've been trained that their first priority is to protect the rights of everyone involved. He said, absolutely. Sure. I said, that's what I want. You're telling me they're trained to do that? He goes, yes, that's my focus. I said, great. It says, then what can I do to help you? I said, I'm a constitutional scholar. Do you need a position paper? Do you need someone at a press conference? Do you need someone to testify in front of a committee? County committee, state committee, whatever, if you need somebody to, would you like me to come in and do a constitution class for your deputies and your staff? If you're going to protect my rights, what can I do to help protect you? And I think that's the focus. Rather than focusing on the federal government and even the state government, I think our first step is to meet and talk with your employees at the city and county level. You have the most influence at that level, meaning not only do they listen to you more, you're more likely to get a meeting with them, but because you represent a greater percentage of their voting public, you can get a lot more response from them. Your voice carries more weight. Also, at the city and county level, they're often the field teams for state government. Now, there's a lot of people in state government actually starting county government. So if you can get them and help educate them on their oath to the Constitution of the state in the United States, of the importance of the fidelity to that oath, to help getting them thinking that way, that will carry forward as they head up to state and potentially the federal government. Now, I have a real pet peeve with the federal government for two reasons. One is I've been trying to get to have a conversation with my House rep for 6 years, and I've got nothing more than a form letter in return to any inquiry I've made. Right? Why? Because this man represents 750,000 people. Now, if you do the math, I did the math on this. If he were to spend simply 5 minutes with each and every one of his constituents, it would take something like 8 years for him to meet everybody in his district, right? It's unreasonable. It's never going to happen. The other problem is the size of the House is completely unconstitutional. According to Article 1 of the Constitution, there should be one member of the House for every 30,000 people. It doesn't even say citizens, it says people. So if there are 330 million Americans in the United States, there should be 11,000 members of the House. Now, you may think 11,000 members of the House is a bad idea. I don't know that that's the right number, but that's what the Constitution says. We have 435, not because the Constitution says so, but because the House was too lazy to do its job and simply said, we'll leave it there. That's literally how it happened. It was 1880, 1890. I have to look at the exact dates. The last time that the House actually reapportioned the House based on the census, it was 1880 or 1890, I think. No, maybe it was 1900. They had 433 members, but they allowed 2 more members for 2 states that were expected to enter the Union within the next 10 years. That gave them 400. So they were 433, but they could go up to 435. The next time we had a census and the next apportionment, they went a whole year and they couldn't figure it out. So they just threw up their hands and said, nope, we're just going to leave it at 435. And they passed what is known as the Permanent Apportionment Act. I forget the year again. And that's where we're left at 435. Now, why do I have a problem with 435? Because my rep represents 750,000 people. There's no way for him to have a clue what a fraction of what them think. How can he represent people when he has no clue? He knows nothing about them. Now, if it was 30,000, then guess what? Every member of the House could meet with each and every one of their constituents for 5 minutes every 2 years, just by doing it 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 40-hour work week. Becomes much more reasonable, much more ability for the people to engage with their representatives, their employees. Interesting enough, the very first amendment proposed to the Constitution would have changed the 30,000 to eventually 40,000 and then 50,000 as the size of the country grew, but that was never ratified. It's the only one of the original 12 amendments never ratified. So our engagement with our employees, first of all, we need to approach them as employees. I kind of got away from that topic, but we have again, they're our employees. We hire them, we pay them, they work for us. It is not, we don't meet them at their sufferance. We meet them at our sufferance. I think that's the attitude we need to start bringing to them. I'm not sure what he means by the right of remonstrance being willfully suppressed. Since there's nothing I'm familiar with in state law that prevents you from meeting and talking with and communicating with your representative. Like I said, all I had to do is pick up a phone. At the state level, I picked up the phone and said, hey, I want to meet when can we do it? Worked for my state rep, worked for my state senator. I had no problems doing that. The only one I've had a problem with is my U.S. House rep. I haven't tried the senators because I'm no fan of either of the current senators from the state of Tennessee. And it's not simply a question of a fan. They've demonstrated that they really don't give a rip what their constituents want, unless they can use it to buy off a vote. Now, if Mr. Gentry has some examples of what he's talking about, I'd be interested in looking at it. But the only right of remonstrance that I know of that's being suppressed is actually at the federal level, in that it's not strictly a right of remonstrance, or the ability to meet and engage with your representatives. It's the fact that the size is so much that it's impossible. They make it impossible for it to happen. So hang on a second. Let me just answer this real quick. Okay. Let me pick a question up that was on the website. Well, that actually answers a question, because I had a similar question on the website. I'll get past the backslapping and got the books, love the podcast. I'd love to start engaging in politics so I can do more, so I can make an impact and help restore our constitutional republic. But I'm not sure which level of government to focus on, where I can have the most impact, local, state, or federal. Who do I contact? Do I start following the proposed bills in my state? I'd love to hear from you on how to get started and what to focus on. How could we get started if you move to a new state, county, town, let's say? So I think I've kind of answered that already. I recommend starting locally. I put sheriff at the top of the list because your sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of your county. The sheriff legally can arrest the president of the United States for a crime committed within his county. He'd have a hard time dealing with the Secret Service, but legally, the sheriff can arrest the president of the United States. I'd love to see one try. I'd love to see one try. So yeah, I would stay at the county. And then one of the things I would do is, if you approach your whoever you're dealing with, county, state, fed, sheriff, approach them in a inquisitive manner rather than a confrontational one. So in other words, when I met with my state rep, my state senator, I asked them, what are the big issues you're dealing with? And, I didn't come in with a list of demands or a list of complaints. I wanted to understand, and I've kept this up when they voted on something or supported something. I always start out with, well, why did you do that? Excuse me. In other words, even if I vehemently disagreed with it, I'd ask them why first and give them the chance to provide an answer, because maybe there's something I hadn't thought of. For example, one of the concerns they first had was the gas tax. And they said, with the increased use of electric vehicles, how are they going to pay for road maintenance as the gas tax decreases, or they anticipate the gas tax revenue decreasing with the move towards electric. Granted, his district is very rural, which makes electric vehicles a lot less functional. But that was one of the questions we came up with. The other one was an interstate sales tax. That's one I vehemently disagreed with. But start with a question. Even if they've done something that you think is really stupid, start with a question and then go from there. And rather than retaliate, try to educate, try to show them why you think they're wrong. especially with, again, proof, documentation. The one thing I find very difficult to deal with is when someone makes a broad claim and provides no evidence that what they're saying is true, or no evidence that I can investigate or follow up with. So that would be the other thing I would say, is how to engage is, view them as employees, but treat them as you would want to be treated as an employee. In other words, be polite, be questioning, ask them why before you jump down their throat, but make sure they understand that this is part of their job review. If they blow this, you're voting that they lose their job. And if you have, like my sheriff did a great job. I have no reasons as of yet. He's given me no reason to wish to see him gone. That's great. My state senator, not quite so much. And that's mostly because of his inaccessibility. But I think that's what I would say, from that standpoint. Start local, ask questions, provide evidence for your reasoning, but let them know that you will be determining whether or not to vote for them, not based on a campaign flyer, not based on an ad, or not based on a promise, but by how they handle their oath of office, starting with these meetings and these discussions. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Any more questions floating around out there in the internets? Andy, did you have one that you're going to bring up before Tony Lord got back?
Sure. I got anything I can really pick from here. How about, I don't know, would you like something simple or would you like something complex?
Whatever you want, man. This is a chance to questions and discussions are what this is all about.
All right, I'll go with the thought of multiple crimes. So let's say I get pulled over for a parking ticket and I get slapped with a fine and a story. Now let's say someone else gets pulled over, same thing. However, they have a history of robbery. They have a plethora of crimes they've committed.
Mhm.
Does it make sense for them to be charged with a more severe penalty for that same crime, since they've committed more crimes, but they're just going to slap it all in that one?
Ooh, okay, that's an interesting one. By the way, this is one of my big issues with mandatory minimums, because mandatory minimums don't take into consideration, it's also with the 3 strike laws, because it doesn't take into consideration the context, the individual situation. And again, it's a catch-22, right? We have mandatory minimums, we have 3 strike laws because judges and prosecutors have let's say there's several of them that have been unnecessarily kind in their judgments. The example I said, guy takes a car, runs over his wife and child, I believe, gets released on $1,000 bail. Right. There's one podcast I listen to, and just about every show they have he has what he calls the recidivist report, where some person has committed usually a series of crimes and they get slaps on the wrists or low bails or whatever, and they're out to commit a more serious crime. It really comes down to me, first and foremost, if we're going to have a justice system, then we have to define what justice is, and then how do we seek it? So let me go back to my old friend Noah, see if I can get a nice simple definition. Justice. Okay, the virtue which consists in giving to everyone what is his due. A practical conformity to the laws and principles of rectitude in the dealings of men with each other, honesty, integrity, and commerce. Yeah, all right, it goes on. So you use the example of a traffic infraction. To me, the question of justice comes first, is the penalty commensurate with the crime? And I don't mean simply in amplitude, but in target. So a traffic offense is it's an offense. Okay, you broke the rules. If no one was hurt, was harmed, if no property damage happened, if no one was injured, if nobody was killed, it's a simple fine for not following the rules and you're done. In general, I would say whether you have a history of crime or not, that crime should be dealt with justly. In other words, if you've got two people pulled over for speeding, and both of them, the only difference between them is one has a clean criminal history, one has a filthy criminal history, you should start off with, okay, it's the same fine. There's no reason for the fine to be different. However, let's say you've got two people, one of them has a clean history, one has a history of drunk driving or other vehicular things that have endangered or actually injured other people. Now you're starting going, okay, is it just to simply hand them the same slap on the wrist for another violation? Right? And that's where, again, the role of the judge, the role of the jury, in this case, a judge has to look at it and say, is this a pattern of behavior that requires something more than I would for this person than that person? All right. So, for example, yeah, I use that example for a reason, right? Because most people can despise drunk drivers. So, if you have somebody with a history of drunk driving, here they are, they're speeding. Okay, was he drunk at the time? No. Then does he really deserve that fine to be? Now, was he speeding through a school zone or through some other place where it was more, he was putting other people in danger? Was he doing 50 miles over the speed limit rather than 10 miles over the speed limit? These are all sentencing criteria that should be considered. But if you try to make a hard and fast rule, then you'll always avoid justice, because there'll always be somebody that is underpunished and someone that'll be overpunished. And the example I use is, I forget where I heard this. It was a gentleman who had committed two serious offenses, two felonies. And he committed a crime. It was a minor crime, but because of his history, he was sentenced to a year in jail, which made it a felony, which made it a 3-strike, which meant he spent 20 years in jail for what was effectively petty theft. That's not justice. Now, I want to change it. I want to add another twist to this, because in this case, in the first case, we were dealing with non-property, non-injury crimes, right? Speeding, simple speeding. Let's take a crime that involves some sort of loss or damage. Let's say that you are a store owner and your store is robbed. They catch the criminal, they try the criminal, they convict the criminal, and the criminal goes to jail. Where is the justice for the victim? Say the victim lost $50,000 worth of merchandise between theft and damage. Let's make it $100,000 that he has to recoup. Now, maybe he has insurance for it, right? But his insurance rates go up because he's now a higher risk because he's been robbed once. There's no compensation. There's no justice for the victim. in property crimes. Similar in injury crimes, right? Where, someone gets hit by a vehicle, someone gets raped, someone gets assaulted. Our system, our quote unquote justice, we don't have a justice system. We have justice system. It's focused on punishment and a feeble attempt at rehabilitation. I say feeble because the only programs that have shown a consistent, effective decrease in recidivism rates are the ones that he's trying to get rid of. Prison Fellowship has an amazing program that has had wonderful improvements, decreases in recidivism, and they have the hardest time getting into prisons. So it is a difficult question because there are so many possibilities, and nobody is going to feel they got the just outcome. It's not going to happen. I mean, look at the parents of one of the people killed by Kyle Rittenhouse are planning on suing him for killing somebody that was assaulting. That was in the middle of a potentially lethal assault, if not serious physical injury, absolutely, possibly lethal. And they're suing him because in defending himself, he killed his attacker. I refuse to call that person a victim. They're not a victim. They were the aggressor because they did not feel they got justice. But that's a feeling. That's not that's not a fact. So that's that's what I'm saying. It's you have to understand that in no situation is everybody going to feel they got justice. But we should be looking for what is just to punish the crime, preferably by compensating the victim first. And that's the other thing. Let's say you commit a crime and you pay a fine. Where does that fine go? Does that fine go to whoever you did damage to? No, it goes to the government. So again, Rion, and this is an interesting thread that we're going down here. Because you're talking about making it costly and time consuming to, again, I'm curious about specifics because I've yet to see, it doesn't cost me anything to talk to my rep. It may be time consuming based on scheduling. Now, if you're talking about getting information, for example, FOIA requests, that's something different. I've got an episode on the radio program next week where I'll be talking about, among other things, a couple of cases where the cost to the fees they want to fulfill a FOIA request are ridiculous. In the state of Virginia, their fee for reviewing documentation to answer a FOIA request is $72.15 per hour, per person per hour. I want that job. I want $72 an hour to read documents all day, to redact documents. I mean, that's, so if that's what you're talking about, there may be something to that. But I hate dealing with, I like as much specifics as possible. And it's kind of hard if, you're trying to communicate to me what John is talking about, because it's the game of telephone, right? He says something, you hear it, you think he means something, then you communicate it. I think you mean something. So I'd be very interested. If you want, you can contact me through the website, constitutionstudy.com. Maybe send a question in with maybe an article or a press release or something with a little more detail behind it. And maybe we can cover it next time. Let's see, it's 8:15. I have another question that was previously asked that I have two I want to get to. Um, what?
Oh, I had one.
Okay, go.
Well, my question was, if a state constitution doesn't say it's supreme, like it's the supreme law of the state, is it still supreme, or is it? Yeah,
Yeah,
is it supreme
yeah.
at all?
Um, if you read Marbury versus Madison, it's assumed that constitutions are the primary law of any government. So yeah, it would supersede any regular legislation. All right. One of the questions I got, and I like this, I have two questions. One is a really, really short answer. So I'm going to hold that to the very end. But one I got here was interesting. This person said the Constitution needs to be taught to everyone, especially kids. Excuse me. I want to teach it, but I need help. Do you have a study guide or curriculum that I can use to teach it? I'm a novice, but with a heart. I love kids. I love people. I love this nation. I'm also saddened beyond belief. People from all over this nation are stepping up in their own are stepping up in their own ways. Teaching the Constitution is what I've been led to, but I don't know anything. Can you please help? I would also like to show how the people how they can start groups to teach the Constitution. This is a great question. I love this question. I get a lot when I'm dealing with homeschoolers, and I love dealing with homeschoolers. I have what I call the 3-step principle. There's 3 steps to it, and it's based on John Jay's speech. Right? You read, you study, you teach. Before you teach the Constitution, first thing you want to do is you want to read the Constitution. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can go to, was it founders.archive.gov, I think. You could just search the internet, Constitution. If you find one that's archives.gov, that's actually the National Archives, that's the one that I tend to use. By the way, if you sign up for a free account at Constitution Scholars, I'm building a reference library, and those are the links that I use when I'm researching stuff. You can go and read it. Read it. No big deal. Next is study. Now, the way I study is different than everybody else, but this is what works for me. I take a clause and I try to explain it in my own words. Actually, what I do, I'll take a clause, I'll look if there are any words in that clause that I need a good definition for. For example, liberty, justice, rights, press. These are all words I've had to go back and find a good dictionary to understand. I use Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary for the main reason is he was a contemporary of the founders of the Constitution. Yes, he did not publish his dictionary to 1828, but he was asked to edit the Federalist Papers. So I think he's got a pretty good handle on what they meant when they were using words. So I read it, I make sure I understand all the words, and then I try to explain it in my own words. And that to me really works when it comes to studying a concept, to not simply have read it, but to have it in my head in a way I can use it. And in fact, my book, The Constitution Study, that's how I wrote the book. I went clause by clause, I read it, I looked it up, I tried to explain it in my own words, and that is a really good place to study. Then I believe you're ready to start teaching because you've got a basis. See, when I taught Sunday school, my point with the students was my toughest question was always going to be why. If you make a statement, I always want to know why you say that, why you believe that. Because very often what I'll find is they're repeating what someone else said. And I'm not picking on you, but for example, your discussion is based not on what you've read as I read it, but on what someone else has said. That's fine. That's a question to be answered. That's great. But we want to go deeper before we teach. If all you're doing is repeating what somebody else has said, those aren't your words, they're theirs. So once you've read, once you've studied, then teaching is something that some people do naturally, some people not so much. I recommend starting small, starting with small groups. My organization is called the Constitution Study because I thought the American people should study the Constitution the way my friends and I study the Bible. You get together in a small group, you read it, you discuss it, you debate it, you try to understand it. I like that approach because it allows you to teach and get experience teaching and learn at the same time, because you're going to get other people's points of view. And so to me, that is my technique. Now, yes, I have tools, right? I've got Read the Constitution in 30 Days, a daily devotional to help people read the Constitution. I've got the Constitution Study Book, which is designed to, it is that study. It is that clause by clause study using my words, which you can hopefully then interpret into your own words. I also have the website constitutionscholars.com. This is the site where people go to be students of a scholar is not an expert. A scholar is a student. So Constitution scholars are students of the Constitution. They're reading, they're studying, they're discussing, they're debating, and they're hopefully learning to teach others. Now, the books are available. You go to Constitution Scholars, they're in the shop. The Constitution Scholars website is free. I do have a mentoring program. And the mentoring program is, again, a 3-step program. You start off as an apprentice, and an apprentice is a learner. You're getting exposed to these ideas. You are learning to study for yourself. You have, you get a place to get your questions answered. It's less about, Paul, what does this mean? It's more about, how do I find out what this means? Help me learn to study this on my own. Right? These Q&As are very much, ask Paul a question, Paul gives you an answer. The mentoring program is, ask Paul a question, Paul helps you find the answer for yourself. Right? Now, the apprentice program, again, it's reading, it's studying, it's building an understanding of the Constitution. You then go on to be a journeyman. Now, a journeyman is still learning, but they've learned enough to start teaching others. You start stepping out, you start hosting your own study groups. You start potentially speaking at events. You start engaging more. It becomes, we have to spend less time understanding the Constitution and more time understanding training techniques, teaching techniques, how to put together an effective talk, how to structure a presentation or a class or a lesson to help keep people engaged, stuff like that. Finally becomes the masters. And the masters are the people, you can let them free. Right? They will always be learning something about the Constitution, but a master is generally someone that's working with me on developing new content for others, developing new classes, writing new books. The master is just that. They've become a master. They are fully capable of acting on their own. We work together so that we have iron sharpens iron, right? So we can work against each other and improve. Those mentoring programs, they cost money. That's why I put them last, because I don't want you to be put off by Paul's looking for money. Yes, I'm looking for money to support this website, but I think having people understand and teach the Constitution is more important. So there's some ideas. If you want more, what I would do is I would say, please register at the Constitution Scholars, and then we'll start asking for help, start asking for input, start asking for people to work with, and start developing that repertoire with people that you can ask a question of. That's probably the biggest thing that I've learned. Reading and studying are great, but when you have someone you can ask a question that will help you understand, that is a very helpful place. That's what I've designed. That's what I want the Scholars website to be. Is I want it to be a place where people can ask questions, can answer questions, can share information, can build a better understanding, and train people to be teachers of the Constitution. So I got a few more minutes. Like I said, my last question is really, really, really short. Does anybody have a relatively quick question they want me to answer before I throw out my last one? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So let me send this one out. This actually is an example of how not to ask a question. Unfortunately, I see these more often than I would like, but this is how not to ask a question. The title of the question, and by the way, this person asked me to answer it on the webs, on the Constitution Study, and on the radio. All right, so I'm not putting anybody out. I'm not going to give out a name, but I'm not picking on anybody. They asked for this. The title of the question is gross ignorance. The question: why do you erroneously and consistently refer to the Constitution of the United States? There is no such document, no such thing. However, there is a Constitution for the United States. 99.99% of stupid Americans do not know who is United States. It is not the country. It is the legal name of the federal government. The name of our country is simply America. Okay. Problem number one. This was a question in name only. All right. This was not a question. This was an attack. This is the easiest way to get someone to ignore you, to shut up, and not have anything to do with you. In fact, I had somebody ask another question with a similar technique, and I responded to them, and they responded back saying they were surprised that I answered. They said they asked the question that way because they didn't expect an answer. Well, if you start out attacking people, they tend not to want to talk to you. So starting out with name calling and ad hominem type attacks are foolish. All right. Please don't do that. So his question, he says, erroneously refer to the Constitution of the United States. Now, my answer to him was quite simple. I said, I refer to it as the Constitution of the United States because that is how our founding fathers referred to it. And in fact, if you go to Article 2, excuse me, I think it's section 4, Article 2, section 4, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States. So Lauren, one. Hang on. Sorry. Article 2, section 1, the last clause, I don't know the number off the top of my head, says, before he enter on the execution of his office, being the president, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my abilities, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So the answer to his first question is, I refer to it as Constitution of the United States because that is how the founding fathers referred to it. His second question, which was, he says, 99.99% of stupid Americans, again, ad hominem attacks don't do any good. They're really meant to shut people up, and they tend to do that. Don't know who is United States. It is not the country. It is the legal name of the federal government. No, it's the legal name of the Union. It actually comes from the Articles of Confederation. Article 1, hang on a second, where did I put it? There we go. Articles of Confederation, Article 1. The style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. We are a union of states. Our proper name is the United States of America, which, by the way, if you read the Declaration of Independence, the U in United is lowercase because it's an adjective. In the Constitution, it is uppercase because it is the proper noun. It is the proper noun for the Constitution. I'm sorry, for the Union of States and for its government. Which also, if you read the preamble to the Constitution, it starts out with, "We the people of the United States." He claims that the name of the country is America, but didn't say "we the people of America." It says "we the people of the United States." This is the other biggest problem with pseudo questions. See, this wasn't so much a question as a couple of statements. If you want an answer, even if you're trying to make a point, if you start with a question, you will get a better response. So, for example, if I believed the way this person did, I would have asked, "Excuse me, but why do you say the Constitution of the United States? Wouldn't the Constitution for the United States be a better term because the United States is the Union of States and the Constitution that created it?" That would have been, he would have asked the same question. He wouldn't ask the same question. He would have gotten a response without starting a confrontation. He came at me bow up. He came at me chest out, ready to fight. Doesn't work well. The second question, "Excuse me, but I thought United States referred to the name of the federal government and that America was the name of the country." Those are questions, not statements. So I have now fulfilled my duty, and hopefully you've learned more about you've learned more from how he asked these terrible questions than the answers to the questions themselves. So great turnout today, guys. Well, I'd like to have seen some more people. We had people come and go on YouTube. We had some great questions. Rionin, and I hope, by the way, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If you will, you'll go to the website, ask a question. If you can get some, again, press releases or legislation or something that John Gentry is trying to do, perhaps I can get a better answer to your question. And who knows, maybe it's something worth following up. I live in Tennessee. Maybe he's got something worth working on. I don't know. But yeah, we had some great questions. I had a fun time. Hope everyone else had a fun time. We should see you in 2 weeks? There's nothing.
Will there be a meeting right before Christmas?
Well, that's a good question. Let me see. Where's my calendar? I was just looking at my calendar to see.
I believe it'd be the 23rd.
Yeah, so the next one we'll probably, yes, 23rd we'll have one. Yeah, I don't see any reason not to do it on the 23rd. Yeah, we might be lightly attended as people are, off for the holidays and trying to hide. But Tyler got in late. Sorry, Tyler. You'll be able to listen to the recording. It'll be up in a day or two on Rumble. It'll be on YouTube too. But so yeah, we will meet then. And anybody else has questions, contact me through the website or via email. And have a great night. We'll see everybody in a couple weeks.